are the Economic Development Group. My name is Magda. Our mandate was to create an economic development plan for the Guan Laurentian sector. Our full report contains a broader overview of our plan. So for this presentation, I'll provide a brief overview of our goals and initiatives. Then Tushanti and Colin will provide an overview of our two focus areas, and Christian will join us later for any questions you might have. Our vision for the sector is a dynamic, prosperous local economy that serves the needs of local residents. In order to fully realize this vision, we have three main goals. Our first goal addresses the lack of employment in the sector by increasing access to employment for local residents. As mentioned in the previous presentation, a significant proportion of residents in the Guan Laurentian area are new immigrants and have particularly high unemployment rates. So we propose a series of measures to promote local job creation by increasing new development in new areas that can hire local residents, by promoting the hiring of local residents by local institutions such as the hospital, and by improving transit connections to employment sectors outside the area, and finally increasing employability of local residents by services such as language classes, training, skills building that's particularly appropriate for new immigrants. Our second goal is to revitalize commerce in the sector. Although our sector does have some important commercial corridors along Boulevard Laurentian and Boulevard Guan, they are currently struggling or a little bit stagnant in terms of activity. We want to encourage diverse commercial activity. Currently, a significant proportion of the shopping conducted by local residents is done outside the sector because they don't feel that local retail serves their needs. We also want to retain the population base, which is key for a vibrant commercial sector in any region. One of the ways we want to do this is by diversifying the housing stock, since one of the reasons why people are moving out of the region is because they cannot find affordable housing for large families. And we also want to leverage the potential of local institutions to do their purchasing from local businesses. Our third goal is to create an attractive environment, addressing some of the challenges in the built environment identified in the sector, such as, for instance, the presence of very long north-south blocks that prevent connectivity, the fact that the area lacks pedestrian connectivity in general. We want more sidewalks, better quality of sidewalks, greater connections with pedestrians, and we also want to create a new brand for the neighborhood, so combat any negative public perceptions for the neighborhood, have an image of the neighborhood as a safe, affordable place for families to live in and for people to invest in and attract new development. Here, our concept plan presents the elements comprising our vision of a dynamic, prosperous economy. We can see the increased connections, east-west connections throughout the area. We can also see greater pedestrian connections throughout the area. Also revitalize commercial corridors along Boulevard Guan and Boulevard Laurentian here. We also propose the creation of two transit-oriented development proposals along the metro stations that are slated to open in the sector. And we also propose the redevelopment of this plot of land here, south of the hospital, that is currently occupied by a religious order, and Colin will go over into that plan in more detail. And throughout the area, we propose revitalized commerce and greater housing stock catering to large families. I will now turn the presentation over to Tushanti, who will go over the transit-oriented development project.
Thank you. Transit-oriented development is a planning and a design concept that creates compact, mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented communities in areas surrounding an existing or new public transit station. Now, the areas that we have selected for the development of transit-oriented development is at the existing Bois-Franc station at the intersection of Laurentian and André Bourassa. We are also, in our larger detailed plan, we are also reflecting another thought to be developed around the Guan Laurentian section, but for the purpose of this presentation, I will only discuss the principles and the measures that we would like to take at the Bois-Franc station. The first action that we feel is very important in order for development to take place is the burial of the two massive hydropylons which are located at the northeast quadrant around the station. These are hampering development at this stage because there is a massive plot of land that cannot be developed due to this. Now we understand that this is an expensive requirement, but there are financial possibilities for this, and we have gone into detail about this in our proposal. We recommend that the TOD takes place incrementally with a primary, like the initial focus on the development of the station structure above the existing platform, which would also incorporate access paths and connect the north, south, and east-west sections of this node. We also plan the development of mixed-use medium-rise buildings in 3 quadrants, that's northeast, southeast, and southwest around the station, with buildings of up to approximately 12 stories high, with the lower stories focusing on commerce and the high stories focusing on housing. The 4th quadrant would be dedicated to commerce just because it is of its close proximity to the Hydro-Quebec station, and therefore not making it very suitable for residential development. The commercial space that we are looking at developing around the station would cater to transit passengers as well as local residents and provide additional employment opportunities within the sector, which is the sector is sorely lacking in right now. The buildings in the mixed-use quadrants that we have indicated on our master plan will enable us to achieve high levels of density, as has been promoted by the PMAP, which recommends up to 110 residential units per hectare for development around the Bois-Franc station. This will also enable us to incorporate the larger residential units as is required by the large families who make up the population of this sector. We will also propose that 15% of any new housing development be dedicated to social housing to prevent rapid gentrification in this area. A new bus stop is also proposed in the northeast quadrant, which is here, where it would loop through the Rue Ranger and also provide greater connectivity from the residential section on the east to the transit stop at the new metro station and the Bois-Franc station through a public square, which would capitalize on the existence of the YMCA north of this section, and also provide a pleasant entry point into the area. The aesthetics of this development are fundamental as it frames a gateway into the neighborhood and it can motivate further investment. We have also proposed a few beautification measures by placement of walls with murals around the substation, or even using the substation itself as a piece of art through interesting lighting design and paint design. There are more details on this also in our proposal. Finally, as you can see by the cross-section on our board, the general landscape from the TOD at the Bois-Franc station up to the TOD at the Boulevard Gohan and Laurentienne section combines a mix of high-story, 12-story buildings at the Bois-Franc station, which reduce to about 2 to 3 stories for the north along Laurentienne, and then increase again up to about 8 stories as you reach the secondary TOD at Gohan Laurentienne. And through the TOD, we aim to reduce the effects of the issues mentioned by Magda and by the other group, as well as connect with our goals of increasing access to employment, revitalizing the commerce, as well as providing an attractive environment for investment. I will now hand the floor over to Colin, who will elaborate on our second area of intervention.
So as Magda mentioned, one of the big problems in our area is this massive block here, which is bordered by Gouin, Grenay, and Salaberry. Currently, it's occupied largely by the hospital and by a religious institution, the Sœurs de la Providence. And this block poses a problem for a number of reasons. First, it's a major hindrance to connectivity. If you want to get from east to west or from north to south, you actually have to go all the way around the block. There's no way to cut through it. Secondly, the land utilization here is really poor. There's a number of low-rise buildings and a lot of open space, just open space which is not being used for any sort of private or any sort of parks rather. And thirdly, the institutions here, the hospital and the religious institution, the Sisters of Providence, do not give back to the local community in any significant way. Fortunately, we do have a bit of an opportunity opening up here for a birding situation, at least on the southern half of this block. Religious institutions across Canada, particularly religious orders, are not doing so well. And if we project out 30 years, about a generation or so, there will be very few nuns left in Canada. And so therefore we anticipate that this religious order will have to sell off their land. And the question for us then is, how do we best redevelop this site for economic gain? So our redevelopment plan for the block will basically reflect the three major goals of our plan. First, we want to increase access to employment, and we'll be doing that on this block by focusing on the development of spin-off industries related to the hospital. We want to be promoting the area to biotech firms, to research companies, to medical practitioners, sell them on the proximity of the hospital and the proximity of the two new proposed metro stations. And then we would like to set up shop for them on this strip of office space down here along Grenay. Secondly, we want to be revitalizing local commerce, and we'll be doing that two-pronged approach. First, by adding a bit of retail here along Salaberry to complement the existing retail on that street. And secondly, as Magda mentioned, or actually no, as the social cohesion group I mentioned earlier, there's a problem of retaining the population, particularly large immigrant families. So we want to add a whole lot of new housing units here. We want to add some new blocks of townhouses and redevelop the existing mother house of the Cité de la Providence for residential, with a particular emphasis on affordable units for large families. And our third goal, creating an attractive environment for investment. We plan to do this in this block largely by enhancing the connections through the site. So we're going to create a complete north-south connection connecting Gouin to Salaberry, and a number of east-west connections connecting O'Brien over here through to Saint-Évariste and Grenay, and then onward to La Chapelle and Laurentienne. We also want to connect Parc Louisbourg down here with Parc Nizy here, with a bit of a greenway connection going through this lot, and with the inclusion of a small little new park there, which is currently private green space. So in conclusion, our plan for Gouin-Laurentienne 2040, Prospérité Humaine, seeks to improve the local economy in three different ways. First, by increasing access to employment. Second, by revitalizing local commerce. And thirdly, by creating a more attractive environment for investment. Thank you. So now I'll invite my colleagues up to answer any questions that you have.
Hi, I had a question about your transit-oriented development, and you had mentioned that near these stations there'd be more densification, and that it would be kind of like first floor commercial and then above would be residential. Was there any exploration into maybe having like more large-scale commercial activities near the transit hubs, like maybe office space or some kind of, I don't know, getting some kind of business in there?
Well, we were looking at that for a specific kind of commercial activity that could promote 24-hour activity. And we found when we studied the northern region of Montreal and the Hanse-Cartierville that there weren't any cinemas nearby. So we were thinking maybe that this could be really an opportune place to put a cinema and to promote activity, 24 activity, so people come at night and not just during the day. We were also looking at office development, but we found that there's currently offices along here, and we also wanted to promote office development more around here, which would tie in with the hospital that is located there.
I want to follow up on that. It's interesting that you locate the potential medical offices, research labs, or things like that in that location. And why not? I mean, but you are showing us that ultimately over 30 years, portions of Gouin Boulevard would be redeveloped, right?
Yeah.
You're showing somewhat higher density development on Gouin. Why not there?
Well, because Gouin, this section of Gouin Boulevard is actually one of the only sections that actually has commercial activity on Gouin. It's a trademark for that, not trademark, but it's known for that. And we wanted to keep small-scale businesses in that area because the street itself is not very wide. There's not much space for parking. There's hardly any space to actually expand it. We can improve the sidewalks a little bit, but it might not be very appropriate for office building just because you'd need a high level of parking, and it wouldn't be suitable at this stage. We've promoted a little bit of office building just around the newly proposed hub, but it wasn't an area that we looked at for development of office.
I think we also wanted to preserve the idea of one as a commercial corridor, kind of be a retail center. It seemed to be sort of the heart of commercial activity in the
And the buildings by the Soda Providence main building, the new office buildings, are they exclusively office buildings, or are they ground floor with residential?
They're mixed.
They're mixed, yeah. So just office, residential. So
it's more like the ground floor might be used by medical offices.
We don't also anticipate that it's going to be massively office centered as well. We think that there's a potential for it, but we don't think that it's, I mean, the way that the trend of like these kinds of office activities, it's a bit hard to justify concentrating such a huge amount here. So it would have to be mixed.
Well, I can see that you on the ground floors, on Salaberry, perhaps on is it Grenet? Yeah. And then on Gouin, definitely, you have enough there to have hospital spin-offs without having to concentrate them. Any other?
No investor is going to be interested to do anything if the environment is unattractive in terms of vandalism and crime. What have you discussed what to do in the next 40 years or until 2040 to make that problem go away or do something with it? Because you're not going to get any money coming in the area if that is not resolved.
The Social Cohesion Group had an interesting proposition for social cohesion in that section, but we actually spoke to a lot of business people in the area, and it's mostly a perception. It's a perception that can be countered by a branding strategy that we've also put in as one of our main goals, because in order to make it attractive for investors have to know what the area will offer to them. So the perceptions have to be changed. It doesn't really mean there's vandalism actually happening, because if you speak to business owners around this sector.
So are you saying there's no vandalism?
Well, there's vandalism everywhere, but it isn't the only place in Montreal that has vandalism. It just has a very negative.
But what would you do about it? You cannot simply say we're going to do rebranding because the people that are out on the street and do crime and vandalism,
well,
they're not going to give anything what you mean by branding or rebranding or revitalizing. They don't know what that means. They're going to go on vandalizing and doing crime.
Well, certainly I think these sorts of things, to start them off, one or two brave businesses have to step in who realize that there is not actually a problem of vandalism, at least not significantly more than anywhere else, and have to step in and start shop. And when they become successful, then that in turn starts to attract other people and other businesses to join the area. So I mean, I understand, certainly that first step is tricky, but that's basically what has to happen. Some brave person has to step up and basically prove that the area is not this cesspool.
My comment on this is that, is there really a problem with vandalism in that area? I think it's a wrong perception for many years. I think 20, 25 years ago that area was maybe not interesting, but nowadays there is not that many problems with the area. I don't think so. We don't hear much about that. We don't have much complaints, so hopefully the branding and the changing of mentality and changing of attitude towards that area is going to make it in the long term. I think it started already.
I just want to make a comment that you have a very effective master plan. It's very interesting. The difference, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it works very well. You show every building and you see what's existing and what's new. We can talk about the details with Suzanne, but overall it's quite nice.
Thank you.
I just said it's intriguing. It's a good presentation and it's very rich with the information. I want to commend you on two things. One, it's great to see a section drawing that you're thinking in section.
It's actually a view.
Yeah, it's a kind of a view. It's a kind of a longitudinal section. It's a bit confusing because it makes it look like the train passes underneath, underground, which I don't think is the case.
That's the proposed metro.
That's the proposed metro. Oh, okay. So
If you get closer, you'll see the metro sign on it, but it's a little bit hard to see.
So that's good, and I'm glad that you've said we're going to be aggressive and we're going to be very deliberate about concentrating housing and other activities and other programs. But I'm concerned. I think that you need to have a higher resolution. One of two things: either a higher resolution strategy for all of this housing, etc., that you're putting onto main streets, which is a really difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's not a great place to live when there are 4 lanes of traffic going at 60 kilometers an hour. Mm-hmm. And also you talked about around the Todd, there would be 12-story buildings. When I look at those building footprints, it's kind of scary. So I think it might be more interesting to either get into a higher resolution design strategy, which says here's the building massing and here's the relationship and go into section, or to say, our mandate right now is to say we want to achieve this kind of net density around the transit station, and we're going to send this out as a subsequent phase of project development so that we can, you could sponsor a really interesting competition around how can we make a good housing strategy physically and access-wise, etc., for Laurentian.
We asked them to include building footprints in the master.
Yeah, no, I understand. I presume that was part of it.
And in Studio 2, we'll have more opportunity to study exactly how to locate buildings and create attractive residential and other environments.
Yeah, we realize they're very gigantic.
But they're very close to each other.
Yeah, but actually the distances are bigger than they seem on the map. So, yes. But it does seem like,
Although if I can speak to the scariness, so I mean this little spot in here with the bit of the public square and the 2 buildings, I mean that's to scale here. So I mean that's an 8-floor building. I look at this, I am not particularly frightened. I'm not sure.
No, and that's good. That's what I'm saying. I think it's more you owe yourself the full gesture of going into a higher resolution, going to 1 to 200 sort of study of what that Todd is like.
Yeah.
Because we say, oh gosh, there are a bunch of egg-shaped buildings, and there's a lot of shadow there, and it's,
No, but you're right, that image.
That's how it will look like.
Lisa had a question.
Phasing. What happens when?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
We specifically thought about phasing with respect to the Todd, and we were going to get things going on basically on the public square first and get things going there. Largely because that's actually in Cartierville, and this other stuff is in Saint Laurent. So we wanted to give the little boost to Cartierville. But from there, basically just building up enough residential, and then that in turn, once there's a bit of a base there, in turn going on to here and putting in potentially our cinema and supermarket, moving the existing supermarket over here, and then focusing on the southern half below the tracks there.
And the sisters' land?
The sisters' land, yeah, so there in fact is a little bit of a phasing there as well. You notice we didn't talk about this building, which is currently owned by the Sisters of Providence, and we felt that initially, if they still wanted to keep some space, if they didn't feel that they had somewhere else to go, if they just wanted to scale back and not completely give things up, that they could operate out of this section here. But if they eventually decided to clear out, then we could renovate that into an elementary school, which would also serve the local population. That's not all what you were asking, was it?
It's too detailed. I want to know overall what has to happen first to make this happen, and it can be for all of your goals. It could be a diagram that you have hidden away that you could pull up right now. But generally, to make this 30-year vision happen, where do we start? What are the 3 priority actions for the next 5 years? What things are we saying will happen by themselves? We don't have to worry about it quite yet. Just that kind of sense.
You don't have the metro yet.
Right.
Creating an attractive environment, at least laying the foundation for potential interest in the future, and capitalizing on the fact that there is a plan. I mean, it's not implemented yet, but there is a plan for the metro that is going to boost development exponentially. And I think if we can put some effort into trying to make these preconceived notions of this being a really bad and dangerous area away and take care of that in the short term, then when it comes close to the time where the metro is actually going to be developed, actual investment could flow through. But I think like he said, the perceptions need to change before any investment can be expected.
I have one comment. congratulations on the effort to create links within that area, east and west and north and south. And my concern was that, of course, it's addressing eventually it might bring more economic activity for the residents and connecting with the commercial streets. But I think that concern might be more, I don't know if it's a transportation concern or if it's a social cohesion concern, but that might not be specifically under your team of economic development. It's broader, and maybe that's one important aspect of your presentation, but I'm not sure if it's in the right place. It's just a comment.
Okay.
Yeah. We were asked as well to be holistic, so not just to look at things purely from an economic point of view, but also like what's good for the economy of this area, but while looking at the overall ideas and the overall structure and how we can improve it over time, and not just simply from an economic point of view.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Laura has
I just have one really quick question. I'm sorry I missed the first presentation. So in this studio, you're generally supposed to be working as municipal planners, or you're thinking about community planning. And I was wondering if you guys, because you're looking at redeveloping land that is currently owned by the church or by an institution that is declining, similar to a lot of different institutions that are declining. For example, like the Masons, their population is declining, and even like Royal Canadian Legion, a lot of times they own property that don't necessarily have a lot of members. Did you come across in your plan of how to take land that is owned by an institution like that and slowly create housing, create offices, things like that, precedents of how those agreements come about from a municipal perspective? Did you guys consider that?
Well,
do you expropriate the land?
yeah, I'll speak to that. Yeah, there's a lot of precedents across Canada, and several in Montreal as well. There's the Saint-Sulpice, there's Chateau Maplewood, and there's a number of other properties across Canada. And generally what happens is the religious orders, it's not so much that people are coming to take their land, it's that the religious orders have to give it up, they don't have the income. And often what happens is the religious orders form some sort of deal, because I mean these buildings that they're selling are really dear to them, and they don't want to see them just sort of bulldozed and turned into what have you. So there's often, they do certainly work things out amongst themselves between the developers who want to acquire the land and the religious institutions to make sure that the land is properly respected and it's not just obliterated.
It's generally private deeds.
So municipal planners would really have a...
Yeah, well, they do when it comes to approving the development that the developers proposes. So very often you'll have a three-party discussion where you see, what is acceptable and what is not. And, but sometimes they make a private deal that then goes to the public consultation and gets rejected. That happens also. Or they do their discussions early on with the city as well as prospective developers. For instance, they do good discussions with the city to see what they can put in a request for proposal from developers to set up conditions.
I think just to add to that, just for example here in Montreal with the Saint-Sulpice months, the private developer wanted to create something like 300 housing units, and the city rejected it, and the new proposal is for something like 150. So things, yeah. So the municipality does have the same things in that respect.
Yeah, first and then
okay.
Sorry.
I'll first congratulate you on the master plan. I think it's a very good effort. It's really good hard work. It's tough. The site is large, and but you did work. Yeah, there's a few details about like the size of the building, the proportion, the distance between them, and that's like far beyond the architecture details. So I appreciate the section, cross section through the area. Maybe a comment that would have maybe put a more or less precise location on the map just to show where you've done your part. In architecture, that's how you relate. I mean, you've shown the streets on the cross section, but I would have added an indication. I'm wondering about land speculation. Obviously, you're extending the orange line. This will bring on like a rise in the price of the land. How do you deal with reconstruction, land property value and social cohesion. We want to keep like the local population and non-rural. That's my first question.
Yeah, to circumvent this, we also put in the plan the idea of community benefit agreements that can be signed before the plan goes ahead. So this would be one of the first steps that planners would undertake. And as part of these community benefit agreements, you can say that a minimum of 15% of all units have to be social housing. You can also argue for community amenities like a public square here, and other measures that the community would agree. So you would also include community organizations and developers. You would sit around the table and then you would sign some kind of community benefit